Greetings, Commanders! Welcome to the Elixir Commander Breakdown video. We're calling her Elle X Ayr Elixir. It just rolls off the tongue best. Okay, so we've been waiting for this commander for 2 or 3 months. We've been able to read her skills. We finally got to use her. We finally received her from the Season 6 Galactic Battle prizes. So Season 5 has ended. Season 6 has begun. We are now in the playoffs, and anyone that scored a top 81 got her as a gift. So all these teams received a free Elixir, either A or S commander. I think it's all S commanders. But here she is. She is an infantry commander, and we've been looking at her for months trying to figure out how she's going to fit into the meta. When she was all grayed out, we couldn't read what her skills actually did, what the percentages were, and stuff like that. But now she's here. Now we know. So, you know, there's a lot to be said about this commander. I did a video on her already, and then some new information came forward. I'm going to address everything more completely now so that you can walk away from this video and say, yes, Elixir's a good commander. How much better or worse is she than other infantry commanders? You can now say exactly. I've done all the math. I've approached all the angles. I'm going to talk about all the major meta uses and utility uses for her. And I hope the whole point of this is to walk away and say, okay, you know, just like normal, you can't trust the wording of the skills. But when it all breaks down, when you have it all on the table, you can say exactly what this commander is worth and what she it can be used for. That's the whole point of this. So, without further ado, like we always do in Commander Breakdown videos, let's look at our flavor text. Elixir, raised by the combative Lunar Rabbit tribe, Elixir has 4 times the usual combat abilities. The biggest challenge they face now is finding Mr. Right. 4 times the combat abilities? There's only 2 of her. Twin only goes off once. The biggest challenge is finding Mr. Right. I don't know about you guys, but it seems to me they just bought this character art and then just added totally random flavor text. Like this wasn't... The flavor, they definitely don't have a lore going. They just kind of threw junk together. But what we have here is an animatronic doll. It's a stuffed animal with a robot body. Looks like some Japanese schoolgirl themed Sailor Moon thing going on, like a Japanese kid's art project that got animated. But anyway, that's Elixir. So she is going to be the Stella side grade replacement. Originally, I was doing all the math based on the idea that Twin seems like it is worded that it goes 3 times. But in reality, Twin goes off twice, but she only has a double attack. It's not a triple attack, which is really unfortunate because if it was a triple attack, I think she would have been a great upgrade in addition to the Arc of War Commander lineup because infantry does need a buff to Stella. Stella's getting a bit old. And she was a perfect she was the perfect introduction for that. But alas, it's only a double strike. So here we go. I wanted to show you guys that her second strike does trigger skills. So here's the first twin. It always goes off. Here comes the second attack, Libra trigger. So she gets gems as well. And then she's going to trigger her primary 20% skill as well. So I'm just kind of showing you guys this early. There's a Lucky Rabbit's Foot. And it's so you know that each successive attack, or the main attack plus the second attack, does trigger skills. That's important because Stella does that, and that's what makes Stella so good. Stella's Wings of Eternity skill does that, as well as the X's skill, Mysterious Wind. Now Elixir has it in Twin. I think it's the only other commander in the game that does that. I think there's 3 of them now, so X, Stella, and Elixir. Don't get this confused with Kid or Mary or Cerberus, who have multiple attacks, but they do not re-trigger skills between the attacks. So that's what's important. So we have to look at her and really just compare her to Stella. I mean, you're basically going to gear her exactly the same. Damage in the damage slots where you can get them. She doesn't have a guaranteed hit skill, so you're going to need Sagittarius. I don't recommend Gemini. Unless you want to avoid using Aries. I personally do like Aries on this commander because Aries or Pisces, because you can go invulnerable and damage, and going invulnerable or reducing your enemy damage you take is really important for the main matchup for Stella and Elixir, in my opinion. So we'll get to the gems here in a second. As far as chest is concerned, you do want to dodge. You are going to be using infantry troops with her. Getting away with some dodge is not a bad idea. Trying to just miss some attacks entirely, that's great. So the Void is fine. Black Knight is fine if you're using tier suppression. Most everyone still uses tier suppression, but for super high level fights, you're probably going to be using Void. You can also get away with Tyrant, but with any infantry commander, you really don't want to get hit unless you have to. I don't even have a good Tyrant, do I? I don't. Yeah, I mean, I've got some unupgraded ones. But, yeah, Tyrant just upgrades your defense. You really don't want to get hit. I prefer dodge. You can do it that way. It's up to you. I know a lot of high-level players will switch their gear around depending on what the matchup is. And, of course, dodge in the pants and then the 2-set gem. Oh, for the helmet. Honestly, Gift of the Valkyrie is not terrible. Having the HP is nice. Damage is really important. Most people use infantry commanders in one-slot bus formations so that they can break through bigger commanders than themselves. If you're already a boss player, yeah, then just consider using Gift of the Valkyrie if you're one-shotting people anyway. But most players are going to be using Devastation Helmet to break through, or if you need the dodge, you can get away with... if you need the accuracy, you can get away with Eye of Abyss. So Eye of Abyss is not a bad choice either. Probably better on this commander because she doesn't have guaranteed hit, but like I said, you are going to be using guaranteed hit gems to make up for that. So, yeah, I mean, probably Eye of Abyss or Devastation Helmet. Simple as that. Use Strength and Weaken Gear as needed. If you haven't, yeah. Okay, so what's the deal with her skills, right? So that's the real thing everyone's been talking about. Is she better than Stella? Is she worse than Stella? Let's compare Stella's 20% to Elixir's 20%. Does she have a function, utility? Probably not. You're going to use her and Stella interchangeably. It's just a matter of, do you want to go down the faction route of getting Stella? Or have you recently absorbed Stella and do you want to go back to maining her? But one thing's for sure, in order to get true value out of these skills, you really do have to take them to level 60 if you're going to be maining her. You're not going to be using her as a utility commander. So, alright, so let's talk skill number 1. It's a 20% skill. Normally in these videos I say we don't get too excited for 20% skills because it's just such a rare chance, 1 in 5. It's not something you really rely on. It's just kind of a look at it skill and say, oh, is it any good? Is it any good? Is it a 20% guaranteed hit? Then it's pretty decent. But this one is actually a damage negation. It's actually worded like Roger's, so the way it works is 20% chance damage will be reduced by 1.6% per level, which at level 60 is 96% damage reduction. So if she was about to get hit for 100, the damage would be lowered. She would get hit for 4. You know, that seems all and good, but if you're going against an opponent who has 1,000 units of tier 12 and you only have 100 units of tier 9, even if you do reduce their damage by 96%, you're still going to get one shot. So in a fair fight, it's going to be pretty decent. It's going to act kind of like Pisces, but not exactly, because you can't just use one slot low-risk marches. So I don't love it. Don't love it too much. I don't hate it, though. It's not a bad skill. It's certainly a good skill. But how does it compare to Stella's 20%? Well, Stella has Dizzy. And Dizzy, what it does is it reduces all of the enemy troops' accuracy and attack. And it's 1% per level. So 60% at level 60 is not bad because it hits multiple troop slots. So in a fair fight, Stella gets a lot of value out of Dizzy. She really does. And she triggers Wings of Eternity, which triggers Dizzy as well. So she can really start laying it on and reducing her opponent's attack and accuracy over the duration of a fight. Elixir, on the other hand, only does a buff to herself for that slot that triggered it to reduce damage on it. So I think in a fair fight, Stella's probably going to come ahead on this one because they're dodging. In a fair fight, Stella versus Elixir, I think Stella wins that battle. We'll talk about the trigger rates here in a second, too, regarding 20% skill. So the second thing is Twin. This is the skill everyone's been talking about. So it's a double strike ability, right? So what's going to happen is Elixir attacks. Twin will trigger no matter what in the first attack. Then she will attack again, and she will trigger Twin again. But the third attack does not go. It just triggers it, which makes sense. There's 2 bunnies, 2 attacks, right? There's not 3, so why would it be a triple attack? Well, it's the wording. It says 100% chance trigger before the action. This can be activated twice this turn. No, it shouldn't say can. It should say this will be activated twice this turn. And attacked. Well, actually, it can be because if you kill the slot, it won't trigger again. Okay, that is correctly worded. Sorry. Attack damage of the additional action will be 10% of normal damage. So because it says additional action will be 10% normal damage, it kind of makes it think that every time Twin triggers, you get an additional action, but it only can trigger twice. Well, in the first attack, you hit for basically 100% of your normal damage. In the second attack, you actually get the Twin damage. So if you have it over level 50, you actually do bonus damage. So it would be really nice if you could get that bonus damage on the first attack because Twin did trigger, but there is no third attack. So I don't know how many times I got to reiterate that. I'm really sad about that because as a third trigger, this commander would have been amazing, but we don't have it. So what does this mean? Well, because you can trigger skills each time this triggers, and it triggers 100% of the time, Elixir is guaranteed to double strike at the beginning. As opposed to Stella, who only has a 60% chance to double, triple, and quadruple strike. Now, the difference is Stella can do it 5 or 6 times. Elixir can only do it twice. So you got to ask yourself, well, you're guaranteed to go twice with Elixir every time, but you're not guaranteed to go twice with Stella every time. But you gamble a little bit with Stella, you can actually go more. What does that look like statistically? Well, this is how you work it out. Everyone starts, we'll call it, with a base 100 attacks. All right, can you see that right here? I kind of have a little spreadsheet I was working it out on. Stella has a 100% chance to go one time. Her first attack is free. Everyone's guaranteed that one attack. Okay, but in order to go a second time, Elle, Elixir, gets it automatically, so she goes 100% of the time. So she'll have 200 attacks every attack, or every round, while Stella only gets that second attack 3/5 of the time, 60% of the time. So at that point, she's only at about 160 attacks, but it doesn't end there. Stella gets to keep triggering it. So of those 60 bonus attacks she gets, 60% of those will trigger again. And of those bonus attacks, 60% of those. So basically just keep multiplying the success by 60% until you cap it at about 6. That's about 6 here. So basically, out of 100 attacks, 7.8% of the time, Stella will actually do all 6 attacks. Or all 5 attacks? Is it all 6 or all 5? I don't know. It's a lot. I think it's the 6th attack. To get a 6th attack, yeah. To trigger it 5 times. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah. To get a 6th attack, she gets it 8% of the time. It's really not that bad. But every time she gets to go again, she gets to trigger those skills. So those 20% skills and those gem 20% become, higher, just innately higher because these commanders trigger more often. So what does that add up to? Well, all you got to do is just add up the average amount of attacks she gets in 100 attempts. And it adds up to about 238, while Elixir always only does 200. So that means Stella is going to be triggering, 20% more? She does trigger her ability 20% more often. Or she does trigger bonus attacks 20%. She gets 20% more bonus attacks, which means she gets chances to trigger her 20% skills 20% more times. Which is quite good, right? We love 20% skills, or we love gem triggers on our commanders, especially Stella, because she's so important for her main use, which is breaking 1-slot bust through Rogers. So getting a Sagittarius proc is what this is all about, in my opinion, or a Pisces proc to defend yourself when Rogers counters you. So that's kind of the heart of it there. So all in all, 100 attacks versus 100 attacks. Who attacks more? Stella does. About 20% more than Elixir does. And that's pretty substantial. When we were doing the math with Elixir getting 3 attacks, and then all of a sudden it made it very clear that Elixir was way, way better than Stella, like 50% better. It was hands down. No one should even ever use Stella again. It was at the point where I was ready to call the alarms and say, everyone dump Stella. You're not going to see her in Season 6. But new information's presented. Elixir only attacks twice, not 3 times, and that's why we're having this new follow-up video, which is originally the base video. I didn't release that other video. So, okay. Let's talk about damage. So the twin skill is interesting because Elixir actually will hit harder on her second attack. So she gets 2% per level. So at level 60, she will actually be doing 120% bonus damage. So her next attack, instead of doing 100 damage, will do 120 damage, which is great because, stack that with Sagittarius, and it's all about doing damage anyway. We're infantry commanders. She gets bonus damage by the end of it. Stella, on the other hand, her damage is reduced. Her damage is only 1.5%. So at level 60, she hits for 90% of her damage. So instead of hitting for 100, every consecutive attack after that hits for 90. That's quite a bit different. That's 75%, or that's 25% less than Elixir's second hit. Elixir's second hit will always hit 25% harder. But Stella can keep triggering. Elixir can't. It doesn't mean Stella will, though. There's just that chance involved. Remember, she does about 20% more attacks. So Stella does 20% more attacks, but Elixir hits 25% harder every time. Now, if Stella does get a lucky Sagittarius proc, which she probably will, Stella will be the harder hitting commander. So going back to this spreadsheet, and then I'm going to tie it all together so we can walk away with this on the same page. And yeah. Okay. So as far as gems are concerned, Sagittarius, definitely the best. It does the most damage. A lot of people are stacking HP now. Sagittarius literally reduces your opponent's HP stat. So you kill more troops. You don't hit any harder. The enemy troops have more HP when the attack comes. So it kind of works like Scorpio, not Scorpio. Kind of works like Vegas Breakdown, but it does it for the HP stat instead of defense. See right here? It's really strong. Sagittarius is incredibly hard hitting, especially for higher level players. It scales up better over time. Stella and Elixir are both going to be using that. As far as the other gems, Pisces and Aries, I really like. You definitely want to have one slot bust going against Rogers. Having a Pisces trigger, or in a fair fight having Aries trigger and lowering your enemy's attack damage, really does help in the long run. You could put Gemini. Not a huge fan of Gemini, but that is an option to you. If you're using airship commander or tier 9 or above, you can use, you know, Taurus, Scorpio, and stuff like that as well. If you want to just go for that one slot bust build, which is what I recommend. Always do one slot bust build. They're low risk, high reward. You know, doing a fair fight with an infantry commander is not fun, especially if you run into an elf or a hoodoo or a Pictor. Yeah, so let's talk about matchups, and I'll do the conclusion. Matchups is Elixir and Stella both are basically side grades to each other. Your best matchups are going to be against airship commanders. You're the best choice against Rogers. You're the best choice against Vega, because Vega's breakdown ability works on defense. You really only use dodge and HP, especially plasma. You know, pretty straightforward infantry commander in that regard. What you don't want to run into is Elf. This ability right here, Lucky Rabbit's Foot, works on physical damage. So if you get hit by spell damage, it's not going to work against it. This won't work against Plasma either, so she's going to get wrecked by Elf pretty hard. She's going to do bad against most Walker commanders in general, just like most infantry does. If you have enough dodge, you might be able to dodge hoodoos and stuff, but even then, they're going to have guaranteed hit gems. So, all right, let's tie it all back together for the conclusion. So, what do we think of Elixir? Well, for some players, she's easy to get, which is nice. If you want a Stella, but you don't want to change your faction and go all the way there and release Stella back to S-Class, it's expensive to get a faction commander to S-Class. Elixir's a quick option. And in many regards, she's a more reliable commander because she always double strikes. But if you had the biggest problem matchup for everyone, which is a full tier 12 Rogers, and you had to break him, you had to get him out of a capital, Stella is going to be the better choice. You're going to put Sagittarius, you're going to put Scorpio, you're going to one slot bust through him, and you're going to get more triggers out of Stella, and overall you're going to hit a little bit harder when it's all said and done. How much harder? It's honestly more like 5 to 15%. It's not like a full 20-25% better. It's not like Stella's 20-25% better. It is quite a bit of a wash, which on one hand, I'm like, great. It gives people a chance to have a multi-strike infantry commander without having to get the Nix off faction. But it's like, why? Why do they introduce this commander at all? You know, last season we got Vega to replace Golem. It's a very obvious upgrade. Elixir is not a very obvious upgrade to Stella. Reliability is nice, you know, but to have that guaranteed double strike, but it's not, you know, we don't attack once or twice these commanders. We use them hundreds and hundreds of times over their lifetime. Not thousands, because high-level players don't get to attack that much. But, yeah, I don't know. I was super thrilled about Elixir. I was ready to change the game with her, but, yeah, 2 strikes just isn't enough, you know. The other thing I'll say is that when we calculate 20% skills, so we actually calculate them backwards. Like, what are the chances that you will get a 20% skill to trigger at least once during a set of fights? And the way you calculate that is like, so what is the chance that if Elixir attacks that she won't trigger any of her 20% skills? That means her gems, that means her rabbit's foot. And the way you calculate it is there's a 4/5 chance she will not trigger each time she attacks. And she does get 2 guaranteed attacks. So all you do is just calculate 4 times 4 is 16, and then you divide that by 5 times 5, which is, what is that, 25. So I want to say, is that right? Yeah. 64% chance that she will not trigger anything. But there's a 36% chance that she will at least trigger each of her 20% skills once. 36% chance to trigger at least each of her 20% skills once. I think you can only trigger your 20% skills once per slot. So she can't trigger Lucky's Fat Rabbit Foot twice in a row on the same slot. It has to go all the way around again. I'm pretty sure about that. I don't have any proof recently, but that was something I was like a kind of a rule I learned a long time ago. So that's Elixir, guys. I mean, I don't know. What do you think? That's what the comments are for. Are you happy with her? Are you sad with her? Did you just eat Stella, so you're thankful to have a replacement for Stella? Am I missing any value here that should have been mentioned? I think she's kind of just slightly not as good as Stella, but in a fair fight, Stella even beats her, and then Stella's biggest concern matchup is Gilly, and I don't think that Elixir is any better than Stella at Gilly. I really do prefer Stella's 20% skill instead of Elixir's. Don't get me wrong, with the right gear and the right army and leadership, yeah, you might get... I think it's a bit of a wash. I think in general, though, Stella's going to win 20% of the time. So do you agree? Use the comments below. If you like the video, give me a like. It helps the channel. If you want to subscribe to the channel to watch all the new videos coming out, I appreciate it. And hit the bell icon if you want to be notified right away and challenge Kratos and all the other guys in the comments that are always trying to be first. You can do that as well. Tell your guildmates about the channel. Yeah, that's what we do here. And as long as people are watching, I'll keep making them. So... yeah, check the description below for the line information if you haven't joined the social group where you can talk to players about all these things as they develop right away, like a chat group for Arc of War players. Check the description, join, message me, I'll personally invite you. But that's it. No more. Thanks for watching. My name is Melt. We'll see you on the next one. Goodbye.